Hamas called on the militants to turn over 28 deceased hostages within 72 hours, but they've returned only 9 bodies so far. Hamas says it would take, quote, significant efforts to recover the remaining bodies from the destruction in Gaza. And the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem says he has been in daily contact with the Christian community in Gaza since the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas went into effect. Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa told Vatican News, quote, they keep writing that they still cannot believe they were able to sleep through the night without hearing the sound of bombs. For more news with a Catholic perspective, visit EWTNnews.com. Beacon of Truth with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers starts now.
In confusion and uncertainty, there emerges a guiding light, a beacon that cuts through the darkness. Welcome to Beacon of Truth with your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beacon of Truth. I am your host, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, and you're listening on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Thursday. Of course, Thursday, the luminous mysteries of the Most Holy Rosary, the baptism at the Jordan, the wedding feast of Cana, the proclamation of the kingdom, the transfiguration, and the institution of the Eucharist. Beautiful theophanies or manifestations of God's love and God's power. I'm particularly also excited today because I'm leaving tomorrow for Rome, and I'm going there for 2 things. First, I'll be attending the canonization of Blessed Peter Torot, who is going to be the first saint ever for Papua New Guinea. And I was invited by the bishops conference of Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands to attend. And the reason for that is I've ministered in Papua New Guinea back in 2023 and then earlier this year. So the first event, they invited me to come, and it was an event at the St. John Geiss Indoor Stadium. And I did a talk the first day for politicians and government officials in the morning, and then priests and religious in the afternoon. Second day was a youth rally, and then the last day was a general session open to anyone. And then at the end of that session, the cardinal said mass and wanted me to do the homily, which which I did, but kind of intimidating with a cardinal there, but I did my best. And so they contacted me again and wanted me to come back. So I came back this year, this time with Charbel Raish, who is the president of Perusia Media, who's an EWTN affiliate for Australia. And he's also been on the network a number of times as well. And Charbel and I went to Papua New Guinea this year, spoke at a parish in Port Moresby, the capital city, gave 3 talks on the first night. Then Charbel and I did a youth rally, youth thing at the retreat center, which is not even a building. It's a campus, a beautiful facility there, designated for youth and young adults. Gave an all-day presentations there to youth and young adults. They asked some amazing questions. And then we went up to Mount Hagen, where I deacon at Mass and gave the homily at Mass. And then Charbel and I both gave talks after Mass. And then we went up to Mendi, the Diocese of Mendi, where Charbel and I both led a retreat for priests and bishops. So there were 70 priests and 3 bishops there. We were there Monday through Friday giving the talks. And I also gave a special night session for women and religious sisters, one of the nights in the evening. And it was just an amazing, wonderful, beautiful experience. And so when we had the debriefing meeting after the retreat, we were having lunch before going to the airport. And we were meeting with the head of the Catholic Professional Society and a bishop's representative. And they said, we'd love you and Charbel to come back next year. So this is 2026 now, to train 1,000 catechists. And so Charbel and I looked at each other like, what? So 500 a week plus evening sessions for the general public. So we put together a proposal. And the only thing we're missing now is some funding, which I'll be reaching out to some folks to help us with that, because they were telling us it's literally going to evangelize an entire nation, which I mean, I just even thinking about that scares me. It's humbling, you know, that Charbel and I, because we've teamed up a number of times. We've spoken in about a dozen countries together now. And he's a fantastic speaker in his own right. But to do this thing together to help an entire nation of Catholics is just, it's just beautiful. So they invited us to come, and both Charbel and I will be there for the canonization of their very first saint, Blessed Peter Turot, wonderful man of God, young man, married, and was killed during World War II, during the Japanese occupation of Papua New Guinea, because he spoke out against adultery and polygamy, and was poisoned in prison by Japanese soldiers. So he's going to be the very first saint. And then Charbel and I will also be going on pilgrimage. We're leading a pilgrimage, Eucharistic Miracles of Italy. And that's going to be all the way to the 31st. And so very excited about that. And so the great thing is that we're going on pilgrimage again next year. So you can join us on one of those. And the cool thing is we've got the MFVA Friars from EWTN joining us on each of the pilgrimages next year. So Father Matthew will be joining us as the chaplain for Guadalupe, Mexico. We're going there in May of next year. And then Father Patrick will be with us in Ireland in June of next year. Father Leonard will be with us in Japan in September of next year. And then Father Mark will be with us on this same pilgrimage, Eucharistic Miracles of Italy pilgrimage, because it sold out very quickly, so obviously it's very popular. So we're going to be doing this again next October, about the same time, with Father Mark Mary as our chaplain. And the exciting thing is I got an email just a couple days ago from the pilgrimage company I used, Harvest Journeys, that they're looking at doing a pilgrimage to the Holy Land now that the peace accord is in place and prisoner exchange is happening, and still waiting for things to be a little more stable. But they're asking me for dates to fit in another pilgrimage to the Holy Land next year, which would be amazing. So look out for that. I mean, I can't wait to go back there. It's life changing. There's no other way to say it. It's absolutely life changing to be in the places where Jesus was born and lived and taught and died and rose and breathed. I mean, gave the Holy Spirit to the church. All of that, where Paul and Peter and all the apostles and the evangelists and the martyrs. It's just an incredible, incredible place. So looking forward to going back there next year. And speaking of that, our topic today is St. John Paul the Great. His feast day is next week. But I wanted to talk about him today. This man really got me started on my journey of deepening my Catholic faith in a very powerful way, in an unexpected way, actually. And I'll talk about that later. But he was extremely influential in my Catholic faith journey. And so I want to honor him by sharing some things about him today. And if you have been influenced or affected by John Paul II, if you ask for his intercession, or if he was an influence in your life while he was our Holy Father, would love to hear from you today. Give us a call, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. The people who I wish were going with me on this pilgrimage to Rome is Matt Gabinski, who's screening your calls today, along with Michael McCall and Pedro Quiles, who help us out on social media. And my main man behind the turntables, Ace McKay. Ace, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I thought of you yesterday. I went by the record store, had some time to kill, and was just kind of, looking around, not really looking for anything, but I'm always intrigued by whoever is working in the record store, what they're playing over the system. Mm-hmm. And so depending upon, and I've been in this particular one enough to kind of know the taste of, the different people who are working there. And there was just this full-on out punk, grunge, something or another. It's the only way I can describe it. I could not understand a single word the vocalist was saying. And I'm like, all right, just try to stay it starts to distract you at some point because you're thumbing through, the Stones and the Springsteens and the whatevers, just, looking, and all I can hear is, and I was like, is this what my parents thought of my music? Like when I was growing up, like is that what they all heard?
Yeah. It's funny because growing up, listening to my dad's music and listening to Caribbean music, Mighty Sparrow and Griner and a lot of the Clipsonians of that era, it's funny because it's my brother and sister who were born here in the United States have a hard time picking up the accent. So that's like, wait, what are they saying? I'm like, well, where? Because me and my other brother were born there. So, but now, I have to listen. It takes me maybe an hour or so to get the back in my head,
Sure.
So my brother and I try to speak our dialect whenever we talk. We just don't talk that often anymore. We're both obviously busy, and we have like a group texting thing of like a siblings thing, but actually speaking together, we don't do that often. So, I don't want to lose that part of my heritage, part of my culture.
Well, if you need to practice it on the show, I'm not going to, feel free to.
But no one understand what I'm saying unless they're from Barbados. That's the problem.
Oh. Well, we have audience growth here. Come on.
Well, we do get calls occasionally from other parts of the world. We had one the other day.
Yeah.
Someone was coming on YouTube. So yeah, we were reaching all. Jesus says, "Go make disciples of all nations." That's what we're doing.
That's what a beacon is for.
That's right. We're talking about St. John Paul the Great today on Beacon of Truth. Would love to hear how he has influenced your life, what kind of impact he had on you. He certainly had that on me. And we'd love to hear from you today. Give us a call, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986.
Another weekend means a stop at Podcast Central.
Man, the gospel isn't enslaving. God isn't a tyrant, but God is liberating, and he wants to free us from the chains that bind us, that we inflict upon ourselves.
Becoming a parent is scary, right? Because any kind of growth and any kind of change has some kind of daunting element to it.
I'm X McKay, inviting you to join me for Catholics Coast to Coast this Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern and Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Mother Angelica had a simple goal when she began EWTN: to reach the world with the gospel message. EWTN is the most trusted source of authentically Catholic content on the air today, 24/7, television, radio, social media, and podcasts. We've never wavered from our mandate to proclaim the truth and majesty of the Catholic faith. Thank you for joining EWTN in this mission.
Here's today's quote from Mother Angelica's perpetual calendar. What is God's will for me? Somebody asked me that not too long ago. Honey, if it's happening, it's God's will, and you have to correspond to it in the present moment. God's will in a moment is like a sacrament. Mother's spiral-bound perpetual calendar features an inspirational message for each day of the year. It's available from the EWTN Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Barbados Blues.
Not quite, but good try, though.
I was just trying to fit in.
Yeah. I was on my walk this morning, I was listening. One of the songs that came on Spotify was Abacab.
Such a great song.
I again listen because as I hear these songs, I haven't heard that song in a long time, but I was like, oh yeah, I like this song.
Mm-hmm.
And again, listening to other instruments besides the guitar.
Yeah.
And so I was listening to the chorus, and I love that again, that ride cymbal.
Mm-hmm.
Ding 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 ding. And he does sound like a bell.
Well, yeah.
We were talking about that the other day. I think because isn't he playing up right at the top of the hi-hat, near
so-
like the wing nut?
Yeah, so the way a ride cymbal works is the closer you get to the center, the more bell-like it is.
Yes, that's it.
And there are some
Yeah.
cymbals that are made with like a bell that's kind of almost like a pimple, I like to call it.
Yeah.
It's really up against the cymbal. So when you hit it, like it pings and you can feel it through your spirit. You're like, yes. And Steve Smith from Journey was big on that, and Night Ranger. Like those are bands
Night
that
Ranger, yeah,
really
yeah. 38
utilize that.
Special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the ping hits you, you know you're feeling it.
Oh, yeah. And I just love listening to it. And then listen to the drums and hear ding, ding, ding. That's like, yes. It's so cool.
So great.
And now I cannot not hear it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I used to, when I was a kid, I used to invert my ride like a China ride.
No
And
way.
That way I could always go straight for the bell, because then you didn't accidentally hit the wrong part of the cymbal. It just, your
how
stick
about
just
that?
gravitated there. But
Yeah,
since then, I've
those China
flipped it.
rides are drier, though. The
Right.
drier sound.
And
Yeah.
it's more like an oriental kind of sound.
Yes.
So it's not meant that way, but I was like, that's not a China crash. Why do you invert it? I go, because I can go for the bell easier. And they're like, oh,
there
I never
you
thought
go.
of that. So
Because you got to lift your arm a little higher to get to that.
Sometimes,
depending on how you have it positioned.
depending, yeah. I like everything kind of close, but
Yeah.
like spread, but like down low, so that I'm not like up here. It's just weird posture. I've played some people's kits where I'm like, how do you play this thing? It's like getting into someone else's car and this, and the seats all like bunched up.
Exactly. Yeah. Like getting in my car after the kids are in it. Like, how could you sit with the seat so close to the wheel? What's wrong with you?
Oh man, my wife's car, she has it where you can do double presets, so you just get in it and hit it, and it'll adjust to whoever's driving.
Oh,
it's the coolest.
cool.
Like
I like that.
technology.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, listening to Beacon of Truth. And today we're talking about St. John Paul the Great. And he had a huge influence on me. And would love to hear how he impacted you, maybe your life, your way of thinking, maybe theology of the body, or Mulieris Dignitatem on the dignity and vocation of women. What was it about John Paul II that affected you, and maybe you're asking for his intercession now that he's a saint in heaven? Would love to hear from you today. Give us a call, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986.
Of course, as we continue to celebrate with our EWTN radio partners, we've got 3 stations serving Cleveland and Northern Ohio as they get set for their fall Spirit Drive. I guess it's a sprint, depending upon how you go, but sometimes it's a marathon. But The Rock Catholic Radio happening and, of course, doing their thing thanks to your support. So if you are thinking about getting involved in supporting Catholic Radio and the impact it's having in your life, your family, your community, of course, The Rock Catholic Radio is one to consider in your area. And, of course, thanks and congrats to them as they get set for their week next week with EWTN Radio.
All right, my friends, it's now time for the Soulful Psalms segment of Beacon of Truth. The Soulful Psalms, we take one of the Psalms from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament that we hear in every Mass and that we hear during the Liturgy of the Hours, and we connect that Psalm to your everyday lived experience. Well, today, we're continuing our look at Psalm 56. Psalm 56 is in Book 2 of the Psalms. Psalms 51 through 72 in Book 2 are all written by David. And so the prescript for this psalm is, I usually do it in Hebrew, but it's long, so I'm going to just do it in English. And it's the entire first verse of Psalm 56. For the choir master, Lemenzeach, intone like the dove of distant places, a miktam of David, when the Philistines seized him in Gath. All right. So that again, this gives the context for understanding what David was experiencing when he wrote this psalm. And he started off, "Have mercy on me, O God, for people assail me. They fight me all day long and oppress me." Right? So David starts off the psalm by stating the problem. Lord, here's what's going on. I love that when I go to adoration. First thing I do is I just give thanks and honor and praise to God. And then I say, okay, Lord, here's what's going on. And he already knows, right? But just being there in his presence, spilling my heart out interiorly, obviously, because you don't want to talk and stuff while people are in there. But pouring my heart out to him, here's what's going on, you know what's going on, or I need help here. But obviously David is going through a difficulty. Again, the Philistines sees him at Goth. Philistines weren't too happy with David. He, was a fierce warrior, killed many Philistines, including their great hero Goliath. And was, took all the foreskins of the Philistines in order to marry Saul's wife, Michal. So it's like, yikes, man. So obviously he was under some distress here. But we're picking up at verse 11. Hopefully we'll get through the rest of Psalm 56 today. He says, "This I know, that God is on my side." Right? If David doesn't know anything else, and this is something to remember, we're going through something difficult. If you don't know anything else, know that God is on your side. Right? So David acknowledges that. This I know, that God is on my side. In God, whose word I praise. In the Lord, whose word I praise. Right? So it says Elohim, who's the word that he praises, and then Adonai, the word that he praises. So and Jesus is both, isn't he? Right? He's Lord and God. Right? And so I can't help but think about Jesus, the word that became flesh and dwelt among us. Why? He wanted to touch us with his own hands. He wanted to love us with his own heart. He wanted personal relationship with us. And so the word became flesh and dwelt among us. And that's what we praise. The God that we praise is Jesus. The Lord that we praise is Jesus. And then he continues, in God I trust. I shall not fear. What can man do against me? Man, I love that. If that's not a confidence booster in faith in God, I don't know what is. But again, to pray this in the midst of trial, right? In the midst of through a particular difficulty that you're going through, to remember to praise and to honor God, that to trust in him and not fear, right? Not be afraid. So this is the other. See, again, in English we use fear. Right, it's just one word, can mean many things. Usually when you see fear, it's yareh, which means honor, reverence, and respect. But this is the other derivative of fear, which actually means fear, like being afraid, right? And so we don't have to be afraid. Why? Because we trust in God, because we have confidence in God's merciful love to respond to what we're going through right now. I love that. Then he adds at the end, what can man do to me? But I just like, there's nothing that they can do to me that's going to turn my heart away from God. Nothing. It reminds me of St. Paul in second. Is it second? Well, I'm not sure if it's First, Second Corinthians. Or a trial, or tribulation, or the sword, or nothing can take me away from the love of Christ. Nothing. And with that same confidence, David is praying this psalm, the same confidence that Paul has when he says, when he's going through something difficult and that he trusts in God, that there's nothing that can move him away from his love and his trust of God, even in difficulty. I love that. Then David continues in verse 13, I am bound by the vows I have made you. O God, I will offer you praise. So he said he's bound by the vows that he made to God, right? He's bound by those vows. And so as a ordained deacon and as priests and bishops, we're bound by the vows we make. In marriage, you're bound by the vows you make. In religious life, you're bound by the vows that you make. In baptism, right? The parents made those promises on our behalf, right? But we still have that baptismal call to holiness. And when we pray the creed, and when we make the sign of the cross with holy water, we're renewing that baptismal promise. So, we are bound by the vows we made. And God is bound by his covenant promise to us as well. And Jesus fulfilled that promise on the cross. He died and rose and gave us the Eucharist so we can have life forever with him. In God, whose word I praise. And then we have a parallelism here. In the Lord whose word I praise. In God I will offer praise, for you have rescued my soul from death. Right? So we talk about the Eucharist, the medicine of immortality. Right? The God's life literally in that sacrament is the life-giving power of the Eucharist. Again, which we remember today being Thursday, the luminous mysteries, the institution of the Eucharist, the fifth luminous mystery. And you have rescued my soul from death. You have kept my feet from stumbling. So, yes, so we may stumble, but we may not fall. And sometimes we do fall. That's mortal sin. And what happens when we fall? You know, we go back in that confession, we pick ourselves up, we keep moving forward. He says, you kept my feet from stumbling. Why? If we fight against those forces that are trying to move us away from God, and we may stumble, but we won't fall, right? Because why? We trust in the power of God to, when we cooperate with the grace of the sacraments, to come into our hearts, to come into our lives, to help bring us to a place of fulfillment and meaning and purpose. And so when we align ourselves with God's purpose, our heart with God's heart, yes, we may stumble, but he'll prevent us from falling. But we have to cooperate with God in order for that to happen.
Yeah, and for anyone who's ever had a parent that, you know, always tells you that they're proud of you, I believe that's what builds our confidence of that. You know, our parents believe in us, so I clearly can do this. They see in me what I have or can accomplish to get to A, B, or C. And then if you've lost a parent, you understand the importance of that confidence when they're no longer there to tell you how proud they are of you. But we have our Heavenly Father who's constantly believing in us, and He made us. So that confidence building should be even to the nth degree, because we know that He knows where we're going, because He's taking us there.
Yes, exactly. And with that same confidence that David has when he wrote Psalm 56 here, is that same confidence we should have with God as well. I love that. He said that He kept my feet from stumbling, that I may walk in the presence of God, in the light of the living. Right? That last line of Psalm 56 is just so rich and deep. Walking in the presence of God. Right, so God walked with His people, dwelt with His people in the temple in the Old Testament. Now He dwells with us in Jesus Christ and the sacraments in the New. In the light of the living, because Jesus Christ is the dawn from on high, the light that penetrates the darkness of this world, so we can live in His light forever in heaven. All right, talking about John Paul II the Great today. Would love to hear how he impacted your life. 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986.
If you missed any of today's show or want to share it with someone, you can find Beacon of Truth on demand at EWTN.com/radio.
I have a word for singles who are getting a bit older and are dating. I've met many of you who are waiting for that experience of being swept off your feet and finding the one. Stop putting that kind of emotional pressure on yourself. One of the reasons young lovers are swept off their feet is because they're still young. They're figuring out who they are, where they fit in the world, and what to do with their lives. They just left mom and dad a few years ago. They get swept off their feet easily because they're not all that stable. As you get older and more established, you know yourself. You meet potential spouses, and love unfolds in a different sort of way. A more peaceful way, one that puts solid friendship first. And like it is with a seasoned married couple, the fire of love isn't always as impassioned as you grow older, but it's deeper and in many ways far more beautiful. This is Chris Stefanik from RealLifeCatholic.com on EWTN Radio.
Father Benedict Groeschel on life.
My regret is that Catholics don't stand together against abortion. On Judgment Day, we will have to face the fact that the death of millions of children legally in this country has happened because Christians did not stand together.
EWTN, preserving human dignity in a throwaway culture.
Live truth, live Catholic.
This is EWTN Radio.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett. Join us later today on Catholic Answers Live as we do our best to explain and defend the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers Live, 6 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Beacon of Truth.
love that walking bass, man.
Right?
Yeah, you
anticipate it, right?
Yeah. This is cool swinging, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got the muffle. What is it called?
Oh, when they play with the
not a trumpet.
What is that thing? Like the plunger. Not the plunger.
Well,
that's the cone, or I don't know.
It's like a plunger, so that sounds
like
right.
That. They play at the end of the.
Forgive us, trumpet players. We don't mean to insult you.
That's right. Yeah. That's attitude, though. But as that attitude, as a little put something on it.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear that with the trumpet player, that's awesome. Good stuff, man.
They don't make them like that anymore.
Oh, that's so true. Well, was it Stray Cats on the groups like that trying to bring back a little bit of that?
Sure.
That kind of feel, but I thought they were not. Yeah, they were swinging a little bit, but.
There is a band, postmodern something, it's skipping my brain right now, but they take pop songs and repurpose them like this. And so you'll take like Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson, and they'll swing it up, and it's like a version like your mind is just blown, but it's just a cool way to repurpose these songs, and then they of course it's like a cover band, but you're doing it in the style that best suits you and makes it unique and new again.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. Love that. I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, listening to Beacon of Truth. And today we're talking about St. John Paul the Great. I know his feast day is not till next week, but I'm going to be in Rome. So I wanted to talk about him now. He had a major impact on me and in my life, and I know that he's had an impact on some of you as well. Would love to hear the impact of John Paul to his theology of the body or his moral teaching, whatever it may be. Would love to hear how he impacted you when he was our Holy Father. 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986.
Postmodern jukebox. That's what it was. Couldn't think of it, so apologize. Of course, as we pray the rosary together each and every day, something EWTN's been doing for over 30 years, so you can join us tomorrow morning, 5:30 Eastern with Mother Angelica, and then Father Benedict Rochelle each and every night before you go to bed. 9:30 Eastern, you can pray the rosary with us as a family on EWTN Radio.
All right, my friends, it's now time to talk about St. John Paul II. Well, I like to call St. John Paul the Great. Would love to hear how he impacted your life or your work or your thought. Major influence. Again, one of the newest saints of our time. Would love to hear from you today. Give us a call, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. So, I had the great honor and privilege of traveling to Poland on pilgrimage a couple years ago. It was awesome. I loved Poland. And obviously, I was most excited. Obviously, Saint Faustina and Divine Mercy, of course, but also John Paul II. Was awesome. And so when we went there and got a chance to see the place where he grew up and the museum there in Krakow, it was just awesome. So he was born in 1920 in Poland, and both parents and his brother died by the time he was in his early 20s. So think about that. By his early because his mother died early. Then he was raised by his dad. Then his brother died. It was just him and his dad. Then his dad died before he was able to enter seminary. So he attended the seminary during World War II at a time when the Polish church was suffering persecution, of course. The church was underground, just like it is in China today. And John Paul II grew up had a real middle-class working experience. And his identity with the middle class, with the working person, would come through later in his writings. He was an actor, a playwright, and a poet. So I know that would appeal to Ace for sure. And he reflected on these experiences during his time in communist Poland. He became very well acquainted with Western culture and Western ideas and philosophy when studying in Rome. And he had 2 doctorate degrees, a doctorate degree in theology and a doctorate degree in philosophy. Maybe some of you didn't know that. He has 2. The man was absolutely brilliant thinker. So he was a priest, and he moved through the ranks, the ecclesiastical ranks, and eventually became Cardinal Archbishop of Krakow, and was a theological peritus. That's called a theological expert at Vatican II for his bishop at that time. He was still young priest. And he made a noteworthy contribution to 2 of the Vatican II documents, Dignitatis Humanae and Gaudium et Spes. So Dignitatis Humanae, dignity of the human person, and Gaudium et Spes, joy and hope. He contributed to both those documents. And one of his major works was Love and Responsibility, which he wrote in 1960. And that was his work that eventually would lead to the Theology of the Body. Love and Responsibility is a great book. You can find it in almost any bookstore, Catholic bookstore. It really is a theology of human sexuality, whereas Theology of the Body is more of an anthropology of the human person. What does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a human person? But his theology of human sexuality is really in love and responsibility. Pope Paul VI read the book, and his thinking on the church's position with regard to birth control was significantly impacted by it. Because remember, during that time, there was a commission that was set up to establish whether the church should allow birth control. And so the commission conclusion was, yes, the church should allow it. But Paul VI came out with Humani Vitae, one of the most beautiful documents on human life and human sexuality ever written in the history of the church. And his thinking on that was influenced by Love and Responsibility by St. John Paul II. So, if you're daring, because it's a little bit trying, but it's worth it. It's well worth it. Going into adoration and working your way through that book is powerful. We're talking about St. John Paul II today. Major impact on me and my thinking and my faith, and would love to hear how he impacted you. Give us a call, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Jason is calling from Dallas, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Jason, welcome to Beacon of Truth.
Hey, Deacon. Good to hear from you again. Please come back to Prosper.
Oh, yeah, I love, well, I'm sure I'm going to be in Texas. I come to Texas more than any other state easily. I mean, not even close.
Sir.
I go to Texas a lot, so I'm sure I'll be back in that area again. Great to hear from you, Jason.
Also, yes, sir. I also want to say that thank you for Behold the Man. I love that story about you and your brother.
Ah, yes. Yep.
And just want to share for JP2, the first time I ever heard that JP2 was when he was in the Philippines. I think I was like 6 years old, and I think it was World Youth Day or something like that he was there. And lo and behold, years later, grown up, wife and children, theology of the body comes into play. And with the work of Christopher West helping me understand that with my wife, really helped me overcome the addiction of pornography. And it was just so moving and understanding what our bodies are for, what sexuality is for, and what marriage really is for, too. So just wanted to share how JP2's work has really been profound to me and my wife and really helping us grow in faith.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And the same is true with myself. The first time I was introduced to John Paul II was my senior year in college. And, I was thinking about monastic life, but then I had a girlfriend during my junior year. That relationship lasted a year. Then we broke up, and I thought, okay, back to the monastery, focus on that again. And I realized that my faith, my knowledge of the faith, my understanding of faith was minor, was minuscule, really. Back in those days, that's late 70s, early 80s, when I was in grade school, it was kind of learned. It was more rote, right? There was not anything there about developing a relationship, an intimate relationship with God. So I knew the what of the faith, and quite frankly, it was quite poor, even what I knew, but I didn't know the why. And so someone said, oh, and I was just sharing this with someone. And he said, oh, you should read the Pope stuff, John Paul II. I'm like, well, I knew he was the Pope because, I mean, in my head growing up, like when I was serving Mass at the altar, John Paul our Pope, John Paul our Pope, all the time growing up. You know, it took me forever to get that out of my head that he wasn't the Pope anymore when he died. And so I said, okay, well, let me see what he has to say. So the first thing I happened to pick up, and this was the year I, again, graduated from college, 1988. I picked up Mulieris Dignitatem on the dignity and vocation of women. And I chose that one for, I know women, you know? yeah, right. And so I read it, and it just floored me. Absolutely floored me. I've never read anything so profound and so beautiful about women in my life. And that got me, that started teaching me the why of the faith. And that's what John Paul II did for me more than anything else. He filled in the blanks. He gave me the why. He gave me more of a hunger and a desire and a longing to go deeper in my faith. And I think after reading that, I was more convinced about monastic life, actually. And so that work was influential. I said, what else has this guy written? And I started reading more stuff by him. And he became a spiritual father to me, really. Obviously, my father was not in the picture. He wasn't not just in the picture. He wasn't a person of God or spirit, anything like that at all. And so I had to find other people in my life. So the monks of Newark Abbey, who were fantastic and still are fantastic, you know. But John Paul II really, for me, started me on a course, on a trajectory that and I'm at the place where I am now in my life and in my ministry and the work that God has me to do, and even I would say the diaconate, because of the influence of John Paul II, without question or doubt in my mind. Thank you so much, Jason, for that awesome call. So glad to hear, and in fact, even Behold the Man that you were talking about, that book, if you read it, heavily John Paul II influenced. There's no getting away from it. I mean, I love the man, and he influenced my thought, the way I write, the way I think, you know, is John Paul II. So I would love to hear from you. How has John Paul II impacted your life, your thought? You heard Jason talking about helping to overcome pornography addiction. Would love to hear from you today. How has John Paul II influenced your life, your thought, your way of living even? 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Now, I keep referring to him as John Paul the Great. Now, that is not an official title for St. John Paul II, okay? There's only 3 great popes. There's more than that, but with the title the Great. So there's Gregory the Great, Leo the Great, and Nicholas the Great. So those are the 3 great popes. But many of us who love and have been influenced by John Paul II have been, just calling him John Paul the Great. Just sticking that, and then hopefully one day, and maybe Pope Leo will do it. He'll bestow that title upon John Paul II to make it official, if you will. And hopefully, I'm also hoping that maybe later on in his pontificate, or maybe the next Holy Father will name John Paul II a doctor of the Church as well. So Pope Leo named John Henry Cardinal Newman as a doctor of the Church, and a brilliant thinker, one of the most amazing converts in the history of the Church. As he was writing his defense of Anglicanism, is when he discovered the truth of Catholicism, and led him in his journey to come into the Church, and of course end up becoming a cardinal as well. One of the great thinkers of the 20th century, of the 19th, 20th century, John Henry Cardinal Newman. So I'm hoping that St. John Paul II will also be given that title, a doctor of the Church. That would be absolutely awesome and well-deserved. I mean, reading his stuff, I would start with something like his first three encyclicals were Trinitarian. So Redemptor Hominis, the Redeemer of Man, talking about Jesus. Then Dominum et Vivificantem, on the Holy Spirit, the Lord and Giver of Life. And then Dives Misericordiae, rich in mercy, about the Father. So those three, if you want to be introduced to John Paul's thought and you're not familiar with him, I would start with those three. Those are very accessible, very readable, and really understands the Trinitarian nature of those three going together. Talking about the Son and then the Holy Spirit and then the Father. But would love to hear how he impacted your life today. St. John Paul the Great is our topic. 833-288 EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Whether it's his, he instituted the luminous mysteries of the Rosary, which we're talking about today. That was instituted by John Paul II. We know how to hit a very deep and passionate love for our Blessed Mother. And that came through in all of his writings. He would do it at the end of all his major encyclicals or apostolic exhortations. He'd always have something dedicated to the Blessed Mother. And he wrote a number of encyclicals about the Blessed Mother, one on the Rosary, for example. He also wrote about women, Mulieris Dignitatem, Letter to Women. Even though he lost his mother at an early age, he had a very deep affection for women and for the Blessed Mother. And that comes through very powerfully in his writings. Of course, the theology of the body. I mean, that's probably what he's going to be most remembered for, is the theology of the body. Again, it's not just the theology of human sexuality, it's an anthropology. So he talks about celibacy. He talks about the nature of male and female. He talks about what it means to be a human person. So it really lays a very wonderful, anthropology of the human person. Whether his moral work, was a little bit deeper, so don't start with this one, Veritatis Splendor, on his moral teachings, the Splendor of Truth. Phenomenal document, but it's going to take a little work to get through. So I would start with one of his other encyclicals first. We just want to get to know the writings of John Paul II. John Paul the Great is our topic today. Would love to hear how he impacted your life, your thought, your work, the way you live. 833-288 EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Sonia is calling from Washington State, my neighbor to the north, listening on the EWTN app, which is always my favorite go-to. Sonia, welcome to Beacon of Truth.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're most welcome. What would like to share with us today?
The strongest influence I have from John Paul II is be not afraid. I have sometimes been plagued by anxiety, and that's a help.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Those were his first words when he came out onto the Loggia, when he became Pope. He came out, and everybody's like looking at him like, wow, this because it was the first non-Italian Pope in several hundred years. So it's for him to come out, and, it's like it was like a breath of fresh air. It's this new thing. He came out, and his words, be not afraid, which, by the way, occurs 365 times in the Bible. So one day for one be not afraid for every day of the year, if you will. But that's what his words, be not afraid. And I think that is something that I think marked his pontificate, not being afraid to speak the truth in love, Ephesians 4:15. And it was that fearlessness of him to preach the truth in love, even when he knew he wasn't going to be popular, even if it was countercultural, he spoke the beauty and truth of the faith and love. And that's something I will always be grateful to him for. St. John Paul II, or John Paul the Great, is our topic today. 833-288 EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Lisa is calling from Orange County, California, listening on Sirius XM 130. Lisa, welcome to Beacon of Truth.
Hi, Deacon. I love your show. I really enjoy the Soulful Psalms, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. So glad to hear from you today.
Yes, I listen to you daily. You kind of stole what I was going to say. Actually, I told your screener that I was just out of college, really hadn't been practicing my faith, just everybody thinks they live in the worst time in history, right? And I did too at that time. And we're talking about kind of the late 70s, early 80s. So it was, time of a lot of upheaval too. And so I really wasn't doing much of anything and really kind of in with the culture, right? And then I heard Pope John Paul say, "Be not afraid," and it seemed like that's all I was, just walking around constantly fearful. Was I doing the right thing? Was I planning my career right? Was I saying the right things? And I looked at his joyful, just demeanor and his mien and knowing that he had gone through so much, and yet he was this joyful spirit, and thought, I want that. So I found myself going to Mass and never stopped after that. And it's just, he gave me my life back.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Very similar experience to mine as well, but so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right. I mean, especially now, we need to recapture that sense of joy. There's so much division and animosity and vitriol and hatred and violence in our culture today. And I think reflecting on John Paul II, he was a man of great joy. He laughed. I mean, I remember watching him laugh. There's some performance at the Vatican, and he was just sitting there laughing because, remember, he was a playwright and an actor. So I think it was some kind of play or something that was being performed, and he was into it. And I was like, God, he's just a guy. He's like the Pope. You think of like an angel, like on a cherubim or something. And he, a brilliant Pope, great thinker, but he also was human. He laughed and he cried, and the way he loved children and the elderly, he's just awesome. And that joy that he exuded is something we need to recapture today. Thank you for the beautiful call, Lisa. John Paul II the Great today on Beacon of Truth. Would love to hear from you today. 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Joan is calling from San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Joan, welcome to Beacon of Truth.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for taking my call, Deacon. I always enjoy listening to you. What a beautiful topic you chose for today. It is awesome.
Thank you.
It was an awesome one. I cannot speak. I mean, I could speak to the end of the day about Pope John Paul. He came at a time when
Joan, you're cutting in and out. I can't catch what you're saying.
I said, can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you clearly now. Yes.
Okay. When he was elected by God, it was the right time that happened. For John Paul II, he was a people's pope, and he made his own papacy. He never did anything after someone, or he did not make something happen according to someone or continued somebody else's papacy. He was his own pope, his own papacy. And he was so good. He brought people together in the church and in the world. And even when we ended the Cold War, it was ended with peace. And he was, I just felt like he was a people's pope. And he was made a saint pretty fast. And that is because of who he was. And everything he wrote and everything he did was always had the penship of Spirit, the Holy Spirit in it. His heart was full of joy. His heart was full of hope. His heart was full of, laughter. And, that Pope was And when he got shot, Mother Mary made sure that will not be the end.
Yes. It's so awesome. It's beautifully stated, Joe. I mean, I can't think of a better way to end the show about John Paul II. Beautifully stated, Joan. Couldn't said it better myself. And when he was traveling, when he started traveling around the world, the most traveled pope in history, he spoke to some of the largest crowds in human history were there to see John Paul II. So he was definitely the people's pope. All right, well, tomorrow is the Feast of St. Ignatius of Antioch, but our show tomorrow is going to be talking about St. Luke, whose feast day is this Saturday. Remember, you can stream today's show by visiting Podcast Central at EWTN.com/radio. Until we're together again, my friends, may Almighty God bless you, keep you, and protect you. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Now, some people, they seem to be born angry. I mean, they're kicking and screaming from day one. And if you say something to them, they say, well, that's the way I was made. Applesauce. Nobody was made angry.
Mother Angelica Live Classics. Every morning, 2 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
The way, the truth.
This is EWTN Radio.
Hi, this is Marcus Peter. Please join me for Ave Maria in the afternoon, next on most of these EWTN stations.
Build your collection of works by the dynamic Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers with Christ the Servant, the vocation of deacons, available at EWTNRC.com.
Hi, I'm Doug Keck. This is an EWTN bookmark brief, speaking with author Father Sebastian Walsh O'Praham about his latest book, St. John the Baptist, Priest, Prophet, and Martyr, and it's available through our EWTN religious catalog. So what's the story with John the Baptist? Why is it important for Catholics to understand today?
Well, the Gospel of John tells us that John came that all might believe through him. So John has a kind of universal role to play for all the faithful, just like the Old Testament has a universal role, so to speak, in preparing us to understand fully, more perfectly, the New Testament.
Father Sebastian Walsh O'Praham, the book St. John the Baptist, Priest, Prophet, and Martyr, again, available through our EWTN religious catalog, EWTNRC.com, again, for all things